2 weeks had passed since Princess Valithia arrived on Earth. The music still played in her quarters every night. She had begun to recognize patterns in human songs, to understand which melodies meant joy and which meant sorrow. But there was still so much she did not understand. On a bright Saturday morning, Daniel came to her with another invitation. "My friend Ryan is having a family gathering," he said. "A barbecue. I thought you might like to see how humans live outside of official buildings." Valithia agreed. She was beginning to enjoy these human outings, though she would never admit it. They drove to a quiet area outside the city, where houses sat on green land with trees and flowers. Daniel parked in front of a white house with a red door. The sound of laughter came from behind it. Ryan Carter was a large man with a loud voice and an easy smile. His wife Laura had kind eyes and a gentle manner. They greeted Valithia without fear or excessive formality. "Welcome to our home," Laura said. "Please make yourself comfortable. Any friend of Daniel is a friend of ours." Friend. The word struck Valithia as strange. She was not Daniel's friend. She was an observer, a judge. But humans seemed to give that title freely to anyone who entered their lives. The backyard was filled with people. There were old humans with white hair and wrinkled faces. There were adults talking and laughing. There were children running and screaming and playing games. Smoke rose from a metal device where Ryan was cooking meat. Valithia stood at the edge of the gathering, watching. She saw Ryan's mother sitting in a chair, telling stories to children who gathered around her feet. She saw Ryan's brother arguing with his wife about something small, then kissing her cheek in apology moments later. She saw teenagers rolling their eyes at their parents while secretly smiling at their jokes. "This is your family?" Valithia asked Daniel. "Extended family, yes. Ryan's parents, siblings, cousins, children. They gather like this often." "Why?" Daniel looked at her with a puzzled expression. "What do you mean, why?" "Because they are family. They love each other." Love, another word that appeared constantly in human language, but remained unclear to Valithia. Her database defined it as a strong, positive emotion, but that definition seemed incomplete. "The Calvari do not have gatherings like this," she said. "When we reproduce, our offspring are raised in community centers. We see our biological parents only occasionally. Once we reach maturity, the connection ends." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "That sounds lonely." "It is efficient. Emotional attachment to offspring serves no evolutionary purpose once they can survive independently." Before Daniel could respond, a high-pitched scream cut through the air. Valithia turned to see a small girl, perhaps 5 years old, lying on the grass. She had fallen while running. Blood appeared on her knee. What happened next confused Valithia completely. Both Ryan and Laura dropped everything and rushed toward the child. Ryan reached her first and scooped her into his arms. Laura was right behind, her face tight with worry. They examined the tiny wound as if the child was dying. "It is just a small cut," Valithia said to Daniel. "The injury is not serious." "Why are they reacting this way?" Daniel watched the scene with a soft expression. "Because she's their daughter. Because seeing her in pain hurts them more than any wound they could receive themselves." Ryan was holding the girl now, whispering gentle words into her ear. Laura kissed her forehead and promised ice cream later. The child's tears stopped. She smiled. Within minutes, she was running and playing again, a small bandage on her knee. "This is inefficient," Valithia said. "The resources spent comforting her over such a minor injury could be used more productively." "Probably," Daniel agreed. "But human love is not about efficiency, Princess. It is not rational. It does not calculate. When you love someone, their pain becomes your pain. Their joy becomes your joy. You do not measure whether your response is appropriate. You simply feel." That afternoon, Daniel took her to another place, a building filled with sick children. A hospital, he called it. Inside, Valithia saw something that challenged everything she understood about social structures. Adults who had no biological connection to the sick children sat by their beds. They read stories. They held hands. They brought toys and games. Who are these people? Valithia asked. Volunteers, a nurse explained. They give their time to help children who are suffering. Some come every week. Some have been doing this for years. But why? Valithia pressed. These children are not their offspring. They share no genetic material. What do these adults gain from helping them? The nurse smiled sadly. They gain the knowledge that they made a child smile. They gain the feeling that they matter. That is enough for them. Valithia walked through the halls of the hospital, watching strangers care for strangers. She saw an old man teaching a young boy to play chess. She saw a woman braiding a sick girl's hair. She saw a teenager reading a comic book to a child who was too weak to hold it himself. None of this made sense according to Calvary logic. Resources should be preserved. Energy should be directed towards survival and advancement. Caring for weak offspring that were not your own served no purpose. And yet, watching these humans give their time and love so freely, Valithia felt something shift inside her. That evening, alone in her quarters, she did something she had not done in decades. She opened a communication channel to her homeworld and called her mother. Her mother answered after several minutes. Her face appeared on the screen, blue and elegant, with the same silver eyes as Valithia. Daughter, this is unexpected. Is something wrong with your mission? No, mother. Nothing is wrong. I just wanted to speak with you. There was a long pause. About what matter? Valithia searched for words. I wanted to know how you are, what you have been doing. If you were well. Another pause. I am functioning normally. My research continues. Was there an official reason for this contact? Valithia felt her throat tighten, the same way it had during the sad music. No official reason. I simply wanted to hear your voice. Her mother's expression did not change. Very well. You have heard it. If there is nothing else, I must return to my work. Goodbye, daughter. The screen went dark. Valithia sat in silence for a long time. Her skin had flushed deep blue again. Her eyes were wet with those strange tears. She was only now learning to produce thought. She thought about Ryan holding his daughter over a tiny cut. She thought about Laura promising ice cream just to see a smile. She thought about strangers reading stories to dying children they would never see again. And she thought about her mother, who could not understand why her daughter would call without an official reason. For 200 years, Valithia had believed her people were advanced. They had conquered disease and extended life. They had built ships that sailed between stars. They had evolved beyond the weakness of emotion. But sitting alone in the dark, feeling a sadness she could not name, Valithia wondered if her people had not evolved beyond emotion. Perhaps they had simply failed to discover it. She did not sleep that night. She lay awake, listening to human music about love and family, and wished for the first time in her long life that she knew what it felt like to be loved without reason. Princess Valithia Saranthas of the Calvary Empire stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and tried not to show her disappointment. She had lived for 200 years. She had studied 47 different species across the known galaxy. She had mastered sciences that most civilizations could not even imagine. And now, the Council was sending her to Earth, the small blue planet filled with soft, short-lived creatures who had only discovered space travel a few centuries ago. The humans. This assignment is beneath my station, Valithia said to the council elder. Her voice was calm, but her luminescent blue skin flickered with annoyance. The elder's 4 eyes blinked slowly. The humans have requested full galactic citizenship. Before we grant such a thing, we must understand them. You are our finest cultural observer, Princess. 1 month on their world. Study them. Report back. Then, we will decide if they deserve to stand among the great civilizations. Valithia wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. The council had spoken. She bowed her head and accepted the mission. 3 days later, her ship landed in a place the humans called Geneva. It was a small city near mountains and a lake. The air was thick and heavy compared to her homeworld, and the sunlight felt harsh against her silver eyes. Everything about this planet seemed rough and unrefined. 2 humans waited for her at the landing platform. One was a man with brown hair and a calm face. The other was a woman with short blonde hair and a wide smile. They both wore simple uniforms with symbols Valithia did not recognize. "Welcome to Earth, Princess Valithia," the man said. He pressed his hand against his chest and lowered his head slightly. "I am Commander Daniel Shaw. I will be your guide during your stay. This is Lieutenant Katie Walsh, my assistant." "It is an honor to meet you," Katie said. Her smile grew even wider. "We have prepared everything for your comfort. If you need anything at all, please just ask." Valithia studied them with cold curiosity. She had downloaded every official human record into her neural database before arriving. She knew their history, their biology, their technology. She knew that humans lived only 80 to 100 years on average. She knew they were physically weak compared to most galactic species. She knew they came from a harsh world filled with predators, diseases, and natural disasters. What she did not know was why they were smiling at her. "You seem happy to see me," Valithia said. "Why? I am here to judge your species. My report will determine your future in the galactic community." Daniel and Katie exchanged a quick look. Then Daniel laughed softly. "That is exactly why we are happy," he said. "We finally get to show someone who we really are. Not just data in a file. Not just numbers and statistics. The real us." Valithia tilted her head. This was not the response she had expected. Most species trembled when the Calvari came to evaluate them. Humans apparently laughed. They led her to a vehicle and drove through the city. Valithia watched through the window as humans walked on the streets, sat in small shops, and talked with each other. She noticed something strange. They kept touching each other. A man put his hand on another man's shoulder. 2 women hugged in the middle of the sidewalk. A child held hands with an older woman. "Why do they do that?" Valithia asked. "The touching." Katie turned around from the front seat. "Do what?" "Physical contact. Your people seem to touch each other constantly. Is it a biological requirement? A mating ritual?" Katie laughed. The sound was bright and surprising. "No, nothing like that. It is just how we connect. A hug means you care about someone. A handshake means you respect them. Holding hands means you want to be close to them. But why?" Valithia pressed. "What purpose does it serve?" Daniel glanced at her through the mirror. "It makes us feel less alone." Valithia fell silent. The Calvari did not touch. Physical contact was reserved only for medical procedures and reproduction. The idea of touching someone simply to feel less alone was completely foreign to her. They arrived at the diplomatic compound, a large building surrounded by gardens and fountains. Valithya's quarters were spacious and filled with advanced technology designed to make her comfortable. But she barely noticed any of it. Her mind was still processing what she had seen on the streets. That evening, Daniel came to check on her. "Is everything satisfactory?" he asked. "Your accommodations are adequate," Valithia replied. She was standing by the window, watching the sun set over the mountains. The sky turned orange and pink and purple. She had seen thousands of sunsets on dozens of worlds. But something about this one held her attention. "I have a question," she said without turning around. "Of course." I have access to every official record about your species. Your history, your science, your culture. Everything your governments have ever documented. But I feel like I'm missing something. Something important. Daniel walked closer and stood beside her. He did not touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth from his body. Humans were so warm. You're missing the secrets, he said quietly. Valithia finally turned to look at him. Secrets? Your species has secrets that are not in the official records? Daniel smiled. It was a gentle smile, not mocking or proud. Our greatest secrets are not hidden, princess. They are just invisible to anyone who does not know how to look. Data cannot capture them. Statistics cannot measure them. You have to experience them. Then show me, Valithia said. It was not a request. It was almost a demand. Show me these human secrets. Daniel nodded slowly. I will, but I warn you, princess. Once you see them, you cannot unsee them. They will change how you understand everything. Valithia almost laughed at the idea. She was 200 years old. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had witnessed wonders that humans could not imagine. How could anything on this small, rough planet change her understanding of anything? 1 month, she said. Show me what makes humans survive, despite all your weaknesses. Show me why your species did not die on your brutal world, like so many others did on theirs. Daniel extended his hand toward her. She stared at it, remembering what Katie had said about handshakes and respect. Slowly, carefully, Valithia reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm and soft. The touch lasted only a moment, but something in that moment made her feel strange. Not uncomfortable, just different. Welcome to Earth, princess, Daniel said. The real Earth, not the one in your database. Valithia pulled her hand back and looked out the window again. The last light of the sun was fading behind the mountains. She had come here expecting a boring assignment. She had expected to find nothing of value among these primitive creatures. But standing in that room, with the warmth of Daniel's hand still lingering on her skin, Valithia wondered if perhaps she had been wrong. Perhaps there was more to humans than she had believed. She would find out soon enough. The first week on Earth passed slowly for Princess Valithia. She followed Daniel and Katie through their daily routines, watching humans work, eat, argue, and laugh. She recorded everything in her neural database, but none of it made sense. Humans wasted so much time on things that had no practical purpose. They decorated their walls with pictures. They prepared food in complicated ways when simple nutrition would be enough. They stopped working to stare at the sky or smell flowers. Your species is very inefficient. Valithia told Daniel one morning. Daniel was drinking something hot and brown that humans called coffee. He smiled at her comment. We call it living, princess. On the 8th day, Valithia noticed something that had been bothering her since she arrived. Many humans walked around with small devices in their ears. They seemed happier when using these devices. Some moved their bodies in strange ways. Others closed their eyes and smiled at nothing. What are those things in their ears? She asked Katie. Earphones, Katie replied. They are listening to music. Music. Valithia knew the word. Her database defined it as organized sound waves arranged in patterns. The Kelvari had sound. They had language. But music as humans understood it did not exist in her culture. Why do they listen to it so often? Valithia asked. Katie thought for a moment. Because it makes us feel things? Feel things? You mean physical sensations? No. Emotions. Music makes us happy or sad or excited or peaceful. It is like someone else's feelings being poured directly into your heart. Valithia did not understand. Sound waves could not create emotions. That was not how biology worked. That evening, Daniel came to her quarters with an unexpected invitation. "I want to take you somewhere tonight," he said. "There's a concert in the city. Live music. I think you should experience it." Valithia wanted to refuse. She had work to do, reports to write. But something in Daniel's eyes made her curious. He looked excited, almost like a child about to share a treasured secret. "Very well," she said. They traveled to a large building filled with hundreds of humans. Valithia felt uncomfortable surrounded by so many warm bodies, but Daniel guided her to seats near the front. On the stage, humans sat with strange wooden and metal objects. Instruments, Daniel called them. "Just watch and listen," he whispered. "Do not analyze. Just feel." Valithia wanted to tell him that Calvary did not simply feel. They observed and calculated and understood. But before she could speak, the lights dimmed and the music began. The first notes hit her like a wave. She had expected organized sound. What she received was something completely different. The music started soft, like a gentle wind. Then it grew, building layer upon layer, climbing higher and higher until it crashed like a storm. Valithia gripped the arms of her seat. Her heart, which usually beat slow and steady, began to race. She looked around. Humans were crying, actual tears running down their faces. Others had their eyes closed, their expressions twisted with emotions she could not name. An old man in the row ahead held his wife's hand tightly, as if the music might sweep them away. The melody changed. It became sad, achingly sad. Valithia felt pressure in her chest. Her throat tightened. She did not understand what was happening to her body. Was she sick? Was the sound damaging her? Then the music shifted again. It became bright and hopeful. The pressure in her chest released, replaced by something light and warm. She felt like laughing. She felt like crying. She felt everything and nothing at once. When the concert ended, the humans stood and clapped their hands together. Valithia remained seated, unable to move. Daniel looked at her with gentle concern. "Are you all right?" Valithia opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her blue skin had flushed darker, almost purple. She was blushing, something that had not happened to her since she was a child. "How?" She finally whispered. "How did they do that?" "Those were just instruments. Just vibrations in the air." "How did they make me feel?" Daniel sat back down beside her. "That is the secret, princess. Humans learned long ago that we could take our emotions, our deepest feelings, and encode them into sound. When you listen to music, you are not just hearing notes. You are feeling what the composer felt, what the musicians feel. It travels across time and space. A song written 300 years ago can still make someone cry today. But why? Valithya's voice was barely above a whisper. Why would you want to feel sad? Why seek out pain? Because feeling sad together is better than being numb alone. Because when we share our pain through music, it becomes lighter. And when we share our joy, it becomes greater. Valithia looked at the empty stage. Her people had ships that could cross galaxies. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had technology that humans could not begin to understand, but they had never created anything like this. They had never learned to share emotions across centuries. They had never built a bridge between hearts using nothing but sound. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Valithia felt small. That night, back in her quarters, she could not sleep. She accessed human music through her data connection. She started with the piece she had heard at the concert. Then she found another, and another. She listened to songs that made her heart ache with sadness. She listened to songs that made her want to move her body in strange ways. She listened to songs with human voices that somehow spoke directly to parts of her she did not know existed. Hours passed. Dawn began to light the sky outside her window. And still she listened. Katie found her there in the morning, sitting by the window with music playing softly. Velithia's silver eyes were wet. Tears had actually fallen down her blue cheeks. She had not known her species could produce tears. "Princess?" Katie said softly. "Are you okay?" Velithia looked at her. For a long moment, she did not speak. "I have lived for 200 years, she finally said. "I have traveled to 30 star systems. I have witnessed the birth of suns and the death of worlds. And I have never once felt what I felt last night." She touched her wet cheek, looking at the moisture on her fingertips with wonder. "Your species created a technology of emotion," she continued. "You found a way to make feelings immortal. My people cannot do this. We have never even tried." Katie sat down beside her. She did not touch the princess, respecting her boundaries. But she sat close enough to offer comfort. "Would you like me to recommend some more songs?" Katie asked. Velithia nodded slowly. "Yes, I want to understand. I want to feel everything you have created." Katie smiled. "That could take a lifetime, princess." Velithia looked out the window at the rising sun. A new song began to play, something soft and hopeful. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "a lifetime would not be enough." She did not include this experience in her official report to the council. Some things she was beginning to understand could not be explained. They could only be felt. And Princess Velithia, who had believed she understood everything, was only beginning to feel. 3 weeks into her mission, Princess Velithia thought she was beginning to understand humans. She had learned about their music. She had witnessed their strange, powerful love. But Daniel told her there was one more secret she needed to see. "Today, I want to show you something difficult," he said over breakfast. "Something that might be hard to understand." They drove to a large building made of white stone. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs and names. Thousands of names. Velithia walked slowly through the halls, reading the words beneath each picture. "These are humans who died in wars," Daniel explained. "Soldiers, medics, pilots. People who gave their lives so others could live." Velithia stopped in front of one photograph. It showed a young man with a bright smile. The text below said he had thrown himself on an explosive device to save the soldiers around him. He was 22 years old when he died. "I do not understand," Velithia said. "Why would anyone do this? Self-preservation is the most basic instinct. Evolution demands that we survive. This behavior goes against every biological rule." Katie, who had joined them for this visit, stepped forward. Her expression was different today, softer, sadder. "My brother was a firefighter," she said quietly. "His name was Chris. 3 years ago, there was a fire in an apartment building. A family was trapped on the 4th floor. 3 children." She paused, gathering herself. The building was unstable. Everyone knew it could collapse at any moment. The other firefighters wanted to wait for better equipment. But Chris said those children could not wait. He went in alone. Velithia watched Katie's face. The woman's eyes were wet, but her voice remained steady. He carried all 3 children out, one by one. On his last trip, part of the ceiling fell. He pushed the child toward the exit and told him to run. The boy made it out. Chris did not. The hall was silent. Velithia felt that pressure in her chest again, the one she had first felt at the concert. "Are you angry at him?" she asked. "For making such an irrational choice? He could have waited. He could have let others take the risk. He could have survived." Katie smiled through her tears. "I was angry for a long time, but now I am just proud. My brother saw 3 children who needed help. He did not calculate the odds. He did not think about himself. He just acted. That is who he was." Valithia looked back at the wall of photographs. Hundreds of faces stared back at her. Young and old. Men and women. All of them had made the same impossible choice. All of them had decided that someone else's life was worth more than their own. The Calvari would never do this, Valithia said softly. Our doctrine teaches that individual survival is the highest priority. A dead soldier cannot continue fighting. A dead scientist cannot continue researching. We do not sacrifice ourselves for others. Daniel nodded slowly. And yet, your empire has never inspired the kind of loyalty that humans give each other freely. Our soldiers do not fight because they are ordered to. They fight because they love the people beside them and behind them. They fight for strangers they will never meet. They fight for a future they will never see. Before Valithia could respond, a sound erupted from outside. Sirens. Many sirens. Daniel's communication device buzzed with urgent messages. There has been an accident, he said, his face suddenly serious. A building collapsed in the city center. They need all available help. Valithia expected Daniel to take her back to the diplomatic compound for safety. Instead, he looked at her with a question in his eyes. Do you want to see what humans do when disaster strikes? She did not hesitate. Yes, they drove toward the city center. As they got closer, Valithia saw chaos and destruction. A large building had partially collapsed, its front torn open like a wound. Dust filled the air. People were screaming, but what Valithia saw next would stay with her forever. Humans were running toward the danger, not away from it. Toward it, ordinary people in ordinary clothes formed lines to move rubble. Strangers handed water bottles to rescuers. A woman held the hand of an injured man, speaking softly to keep him calm. An old man directed traffic to make way for emergency vehicles. Daniel was already moving. He stripped off his jacket and joined a group trying to clear a blocked entrance. Katie was beside him, her small hands working alongside massive construction workers. Valithia stood frozen. Every instinct in her body told her to retreat to safety. This was not her world. These were not her people. She had no obligation to risk herself, but then she heard it. A child crying. Somewhere in the rubble, a child was trapped. Without thinking, Valithia moved forward. The Calvari were stronger than humans. Much stronger. She reached a section where humans were struggling to lift a massive beam of concrete. They were failing. They did not have the strength. Move aside, Valithia said. She gripped the beam and pulled. Her muscles strained. Her perfectly controlled body screamed in protest. But she did not stop. She thought about the little girl at Ryan's barbecue. She thought about the children in the hospital. She thought about Chris, who died so 3 strangers could live. The beam shifted. Then it lifted. Humans rushed into the gap she had created and pulled out a woman and her young son. The boy was crying but alive. The mother was injured but conscious. Someone placed a hand on Valithya's shoulder. She turned to see Daniel, his face covered in dust, his hands bleeding from the rubble. Thank you, he said simply. Valithia looked down at her own hands. They were scratched and dirty. Her expensive diplomatic clothes were ruined. Her body ached in ways she had never experienced. And yet, for the first time in 200 years, she felt truly alive. They worked until sunset. Valithia helped lift debris, carry supplies, and comfort frightened survivors. She watched humans cry with relief when loved ones were found. She saw strangers embrace after facing death together. She witnessed a city that refused to abandon its people as darkness fell. She sat on a pile of rubble, exhausted in a way she had never been. Daniel sat beside her, equally tired. I finally understand, Valithia said quietly. Why humans survived your brutal world. Why you spread across the stars. Why other species fear you even though you are physically weaker than most. Daniel looked at her, waiting. When disaster comes, most species think only of themselves. They calculate odds. They preserve resources. They protect their own genetic line. She shook her head slowly. But humans run toward the fire. You lift the beam. You carry the child. You give your life for a stranger's future. Her skin flushed deep blue again. Tears rolled down her cheeks for the third time since arriving on Earth. Your species has turned sacrifice into a weapon. And against that weapon, no empire in the galaxy can stand. Daniel reached out and gently took her dusty hand in his bleeding one. It is not a weapon, Princess. It is just love. Extended to everyone. Even strangers. Even aliens who came to judge us. Valithia looked at their joined hands. A month ago, she would have pulled away. Now, she held on. The next morning, she sent a message to the Galactic Council requesting an extension of her mission. Her superiors were confused. They asked for an explanation. Valithia did not give one. Some things she was learning could not be explained in official reports. They could only be lived. 1 month had passed since Princess Valithia arrived on Earth. Tomorrow, she would present her findings to the Galactic Council. Tomorrow, the fate of humanity would be decided based on her words. She sat alone in her quarters, reviewing the reports she had written. Pages and pages of observations. Statistics about human biology. Analysis of their technology. Charts showing their economic development. All of it felt meaningless. The real things she had learned were not in those reports. The music that had made her cry. The family that had shown her what love looked like. The strangers who had run toward danger to save lives. The feeling of Daniel's hand in hers as they sat together in the rubble. How could she explain any of that to the council? A knock came at her door. Daniel entered, carrying 2 cups of that brown drink humans called coffee. He handed one to her. I thought you might need this, he said. You look worried. Valithia took the cup. She had learned to appreciate coffee over the past few weeks. It was bitter and strong, like so much of human life. I do not know what to tell them, she admitted. The council expects data, evidence, logical arguments for or against human citizenship. But everything I have learned cannot be measured. Daniel sat across from her. Then tell them what you feel. The Calvary do not make decisions based on feelings. Maybe that is the problem. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, the lights of Geneva sparkled against the night sky. Somewhere in the city, humans were making music, loving their families, and preparing to face whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. Can I ask you something? Valithia said, Always. Why were you so kind to me? From the first moment we met, you treated me with warmth and patience. Even when I was cold and dismissive. Even when I called your species primitive. Why? Daniel smiled. Because that is what humans do. We meet strangers and give them a chance. We assume the best in people until proven wrong. You came here thinking we were beneath you, but we saw someone who might become a friend. I do not deserve your friendship. I came to judge you, and instead you helped save lives when that building collapsed. You held the hand of a frightened child in the hospital. You cried listening to our music and laughed at Katie's terrible jokes. Daniel leaned forward. You became one of us, Valithia, whether you meant to or not. Her skin flushed that deep blue again. She had blushed more in the past month than in her entire life before it. There is something I need to tell you, she said quietly. Something that has confused me since I do not have a word for it in my language. Daniel waited. When I am with you, I feel different. When you smile, something inside me becomes lighter. When you are absent, I notice. I think about what you might say about things I see. I wonder what music you might enjoy. I find myself wanting to stay on this planet, not to complete my mission, but because leaving would mean leaving you. She looked up at him, her silver eyes uncertain. What is this feeling? Is there a human word for it? Daniel's expression softened. He reached across the table and took her hand, gently, the way she had seen human families do. We call it connection, he said. It is the beginning of something. Friendship, maybe, or something more. We do not always know where it leads, but we follow it anyway. Is this another human secret? The biggest one? We build our entire lives around connections. Every friendship, every family, every love story starts with this feeling. Two people recognizing something in each other, choosing to move closer instead of staying apart. Valithia held his hand tighter. I am 200 years old. I have never felt this before. Then I am honored to be the first. They stayed like that for a long time. Two beings from different worlds, connected by something neither could fully explain. The next day, Valithia stood before the Galactic Council. Her image was projected across thousands of screens on hundreds of worlds. The future of humanity depended on her next words. The council elder spoke first. Princess Valithia, you have spent 1 month studying the humans. We await your report. Based on your observations, should humanity be granted full galactic citizenship? Valithia looked at the cold, expectant faces of the council members. She thought about her prepared speech, full of data and analysis. Then she thought about music and tears and children and sacrifice, and the warmth of Daniel's hand. She threw her prepared speech away. I came to Earth expecting to find a primitive species, she began. Weak creatures who had somehow survived long enough to reach the stars. I expected to catalog their deficiencies and return with evidence that they were not ready to stand among the great civilizations. She paused, letting her words settle. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the council. Humans are physically weaker than most species. Their lives are short. Their technology is still developing. By every metric we normally use, they should not qualify for citizenship. The council members nodded. This was what they expected. But our metrics are incomplete. They measure power and resources and advancement. They do not measure what truly matters. Valithya's voice grew stronger. Humans have created something no other species has mastered. They have learned to share emotions across time through music. They have built families bound not by biology, but by choice. They sacrifice themselves for strangers without hesitation. They run toward danger instead of away from it. Her skin flushed blue as emotion filled her voice. I watched a mother comfort her daughter over a tiny scratch, and I saw more love in that moment than I have witnessed in 200 years among my own people. I watched strangers give their time to dying children they would never see again. I watched an entire city refuse to abandon its people when disaster struck. She looked directly at the council elder. We have asked ourselves why humans survived their brutal homeworld. I now know the answer. They survived because they chose to care about each other. They chose to feel pain so others would not have to. They chose to love without logic and give without expectation. Valithia stood tall, her voice ringing across the galaxy. Humans do not have secrets. That is the greatest truth I learned. Everything they are, they show openly to the universe. Their emotions, their weaknesses, their love. They hide nothing. And that openness, that courage to be vulnerable, makes them stronger than any empire that rules through fear and calculation. She took a deep breath. I recommend full citizenship, not because humans are ready to join us, but because we have much to learn from them. I fear that if we do not learn it soon, we will become exactly what we accuse others of being: cold, disconnected, alone. The council chamber was silent. Then, one by one, the council members began to vote. The results appeared on every screen. Unanimous approval. Humanity had been accepted into the galactic community. 1 month later, Valithia returned to Earth, not as an observer, not as a judge. She had requested a permanent ambassador position. The first Calvari in history to make such a request. Daniel was waiting for her at the landing platform. He smiled when he saw her. "Welcome home, Ambassador." Home. The word felt strange and wonderful at the same time. Valithia walked toward him. When she reached him, she extended her hand. A human handshake. Something she had once found disturbing. Daniel took her hand. His skin was warm against hers. "I came here to study human secrets," she said. "But I discovered that humans have no secrets at all. You show the universe exactly what you are. And what you are is extraordinary." Daniel smiled. "Does this mean you are staying?" Valithia looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to appear as the sun set. "I have lived for 200 years," she said. "And I have never felt more alive than I do on this small, rough, beautiful planet." "Yes, Daniel, I am staying." She held his hand as darkness fell and stars filled the sky. The princess who once looked down on humanity now looked up at the stars beside them. She had crossed the galaxy searching for secrets. She had found something better. She had found a reason to feel and that, she understood now, was the most human thing of all.